Today on the Ayden Jackson Show, we're going to be discussing Trump and Elon's drama that happened over this last week, and we're going to be discussing ICE protests. All of that and much more, so stay tuned. Broadcasting from my studio, my name is Ayden, and this is the Ayden Jackson Show. If you're new here, I'm a country singer / songwriter, and on this podcast, I discuss world news and, of course, country music. If that sounds like a show you like, please consider subscribing on whatever platform you're listening on, and let's go ahead and get right into the episode. We have a lot of news to cover, and there's even some smaller stories that I've been wanting to cover that I decided not to cover because these big stories are the most important, but there were some little stories that really weren't worth covering. So let's go ahead and get right into it. There's been a lot of news over the last couple weeks, and some pretty big news actually that you've probably already heard of, to be honest, but it'll probably surprise some people as well. But let's go ahead and get into our first story. Todd and Julie Chrisley were officially pardoned by President Trump. Now, they were arrested in 2023 because of tax evasion. That is what they were accused of, but I believe there were other motivations behind it, behind them going to prison. I think it was wrong, and I also think it was wrong that Todd was sentenced to 12 years in prison and Julie was sentenced to 7, while you got people like Josh Duggar, Mr. Child Porn, getting 12 years in prison. It doesn't really make sense. So I'm really glad they got pardoned. I think that's amazing. And on top of them getting pardoned, they are getting a new Lifetime show. I guess it's been in the works for a while, and I guess they actually just wrapped up filming like right before they were pardoned. And I guess when they were pardoned, they brought the cameras and they just continued filming. And I guess the show's now going to focus on like their life, getting out of prison. So pretty crazy. I saw both Todd and Julie Chrisley. Julie Chrisley, though, she looks completely different. Todd looks a little different, like he's been working out in prison. Julie, though, like her hair is like dark. It's darker, it's like it's like fades to gray. You have to look up a picture of her, but she used to have blonde hair, and I think she's going to stick with this more natural look, which honestly makes her a little more relatable. So I think it's good they were pardoned, though. I think it was dumb they were in prison, especially for that long. Now, if you were on X this last week, which this happened, I think, Thursday, Elon Musk and Donald Trump got into kind of some drama with each other. So Elon Musk is officially, no longer working for the government as of a little over a week ago. There's a bill that Trump's been trying to get passed called the Big Beautiful Bill. I don't know a lot of details about it because it's a big bill and I don't really like reading big bills like that. I don't know too much of what's in it, and I know a little bit of what was in it, but Elon was not a supporter of it, and he made that publicly known on X, and Trump, started firing back on Truth Social pretty quick, and then their fights got so intense that Elon actually put out a tweet and said, "Time to drop the big bomb. The real reason Donald Trump has not released the Epstein files is because he's in them." That's what Elon Musk said on X. Now, we know that Trump's name appears in like the flight logs. I mean, we know that. We know his name is somewhere in there because he knew Jeffrey Epstein. However, him and Jeffrey Epstein were not on good terms, and I think he even kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago at one point. So I don't think he was involved in any pedophile activities like Jeffrey Epstein. I don't. But and Elon did delete that tweet, by the way, and obviously he can't really take that back. But I do want the Epstein files to be released, all of them, everything they have. I mean, we just need to know. And I really feel like there's a deep reason as to why they're hiding them from us. Like maybe someone threatening them. That's all I'm going to say on that, though. Yesterday, so when I'm recording this is Sunday when I'm recording this. Yesterday, and I think they're still going on, but they're finally being stopped. There were ICE protests. So, ICE is ramping up their operations. I think they're now raiding like Home Depots. They raided one in California, I think, yesterday. But there's protesters, and they're actually getting violent. They're actually trying to hurt the ICE officers, trying to stop their vehicles. One of them even got ran over, which I thought was pretty funny. Because, like, if you're standing in front of someone's car trying to block them, you deserve to be run over, especially if it's a cop. Like, that's just dumb. What do you think is going to happen? If it's someone in law enforcement, that's just, I don't know. People on the left are very dumb. That's all I'm going to say. However, Trump has officially to get these protests to stop because they are violent, and I think he learned from the BLM protests how out of hand leftists can get. They think that everything they believe is correct, and they think that anyone that disagrees with them is this, and this, and it's crap. I mean, they know that they're wrong. I honestly believe that. They're just brainwashed. And Pete Hegseth said that if these protests continue, he will deploy active duty Marines, which I think is pretty awesome because these protests need to stop. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous to want terrorists in our country. And anyone that's protesting ICE, in my opinion, is a terrorist. They literally are. They want the U.S. destroyed. And half these protesters are literally waving Mexican flags when they don't want to go back to Mexico. Like, if you love the U.S. so much, at least wave our flag. Like, you want to stay here. Clearly, you acknowledge that this country has something that other countries don't have to offer. This country's the best, and people know that, and that's why they want to stay here. And then they pretend that it's not the best. Like, it can't be both ways. If someone's waving a Mexican flag, they need to go to Mexico if it's so great. If you're going to live here, wave the American flag because this is America, and also speak English because I think it should be mandated that everybody speak English who live in America. Whatever. This next story actually kind of makes me sad that I have to cover because I've been a huge Newsboys fan for years. I first started listening to them in like 2020, I think it was, maybe 2019. I think it was 2020. And I saw them in God's Not Dead. I watched the first one, and I've seen all those movies. But I've been a really big Newsboys fan. In fact, January of 2024, I saw them in concert. January 20th is actually my birthday. I saw them in concert. And Michael Tate was the lead singer at that point. He stepped down in January of this year, and I covered it, which, that was a year after I saw them. He stepped down in January, and I covered it on this podcast. It was actually literally exactly a year from when I saw them because I covered it like the week Trump got inaugurated, so January 20th, which was my birthday again. But he stepped down, obviously, in January. Well, now there's allegations coming out that he's like sexually assaulted some men, and there's been, I guess, rumors for years that he was a homo behind the scenes, and all sorts of rumors. And these are just allegations at this point. You can go read up on this if you want, read all the details, into this. I really hope these aren't true, these allegations. I really do, because it just shows, he was living a double life. And apparently, Newsboys did put out a statement. You can go read their statement. He apparently did confess to them before he left the band that he was living a double life. And, he never seemed like a homo to me. I mean, he just didn't. But these are allegations at this point. I do believe in innocent until proven guilty. There are a lot of people that have came forward, though, and a lot of the stories are pretty similar, and like there's a lot of similarities, so it is very suspicious looking. And since he confessed to living a double life, leads me to believe these could be true. But I want to hope for the best, obviously, in this situation. One thing I will say, though, is the Bible is very clear that everybody gets forgiveness. Nobody is too far gone to be forgiven. So, if he simply repents and turns his life around, I hope if these are true, he can turn his life around. And I hope these aren't true, though. I really do. And it pains me to even have to cover this, because honestly, he was my favorite Newsboys singer. He was. He was their third singer. Now Adam A.G. has officially became their lead singer, and he's pretty good. He was in a few bands before Newsboys as well. But I just, this really saddens me, because, like I said, I'm a huge Newsboys fan, and also, if he was doing this stuff, I would think the band would know about it, because you're very close when you're on tour. And there was even, allegations of cocaine use, and, people saying that these Christian bands, Newsboys included, that's the main one they're talking about, they get drunk behind the scenes. So, when they're on their tour bus, they have vodka. And, the Bible is very clear on getting drunk. Drinking isn't a sin, but getting drunk is. They're two different things. And typically, shots are designed to get people drunk. So I don't know. One thing I will say, though, is that they are still, Newsboys, they're a major label band. They are signed to a label that is under the Universal Music Group umbrella. And so are a lot of other Christian artists, and and artists that call themselves Christian as well, because a lot of them, support LGBTQ crap. And you read the Bible, you don't just get to pick and choose what's true and what's not. You don't get to pick and choose what you believe out of the Bible. It doesn't work that way. And that's the mentality that some of these Christians have. And I hope this story isn't true. He's yet to put out a statement. The band did, because obviously it makes them kind of look bad if that was happening all these years. They put out a statement. I hope he puts out a statement and denies these claims. And if he doesn't, it doesn't look very good. But he can still get forgiveness and turn his life around. And I hope if these are true, he's able to do that, because this sucks. Anyways, my name has been Ayden, and this has been The Ayden Jackson Show.